Welcome to Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast. 1, 2. Welcome to Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast. I'm Jeffrey A. McGuire. You can call me Jam. And this is where we celebrate the TYPO3 community, sharing your stories, talking about your projects and the difference you make in, around, and with TYPO3 CMS. On this episode of Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast, I continue my late 2020 conversation with Benni Mack, Core Project Lead of TYPO3. In Part 2, Benni, as a business leader of a digital agency using open source technologies and as the technical leader of an open source project, Benni and I dive into trying to balance between open source and hypes, what's exciting in technology and what's new and shiny versus the longevity of TYPO3 websites and the cost of maintenance and balancing fancy new shiny things and consistent reliable value. We also touch on corporate versus individual influence and benefit in open source, making values-based choices, and the fact that clients, as Benni says, sometimes they don't need what they want. And you heard it here first, folks. We are announcing on this podcast episode B13's pivot to washing machines. Welcome to the podcast, Benni Mack.
They don't even know that they're using TYPO3.
Exactly. Hey, so let's shift gear a little bit. What currently excites you in the open source world?
One thing that, well, I don't know if it excites me, but something I find quite interesting is that there's these hypes and they come and go with JavaScript frameworks or whatever you can build with it.
Oh, so my favorite question talking with front-end people is, what's your favorite JavaScript framework this week?
Yes, exactly.
And I remember we were sitting with Matthias Schreiber, and it was literally like January 12, 2019, and there was an article online, the best new JavaScript frameworks of 2019. I'm sorry to interrupt. So you were talking about hypes.
Crazy. Yeah, and so I'm excited by the hypes because I don't think they're mature enough, but they also offer a new way of looking at things that you've been used to a long time. And I like to study them and see what my takes on that and what I like about it and what I don't like about it, and see what I can use, even though or especially for TYPO3, because that's the majority of my open source work. So that is PHP and that's TYPO3, but also the whole JavaScript and Kubernetes thing and whatever is cool at DevOps. It's interesting, but I'm not hands-on on these topics. So I rather watch that from a distance and see how long people will use that. So because I'm in a different kind of business, I would say, with TYPO3, because you build something that can last for a lot of years. And if you use a front-end JavaScript library, even though it's going to be maintained for 2 years or 3 years, you still apparently have to update it every week or so. And I don't want to do that with all of my projects I do with TYPO3.
Right. And at every level of the stack as well. So, I mean, we're switching a little bit between hats, but, apart from your chainsaw hat that you have on your head, you have a TYPO3 project lead hat, and you have an agency lead hat with B13, where you're a co-founder and CTO, I guess, right? So you actually need to make conservative decisions for your clients and your business, because the infrastructure that you run has to be quite stable and quite solid, and you can't spend all your time upgrading some random thing that somebody got excited about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it does not even have to be TYPO3, but if your front end is using whatever JavaScript library, we ran into this a few years ago. You do Bower and Grunt, and now you use Webpack, and now you use Rollup. And you're like, I'm just doing that for changing the stack because that's what you used to use now. This is crazy. Apart from that, what I like about the open source the awareness of larger corporations that they're building on top of something that somebody's doing in their home in their spare time. I feel like this gets more and more traction, which is good. And I see larger corporations supporting that. I mean, TYPO3, in my opinion, is a larger PHP-based system where you have an association and a lot of members, but they have that awareness already. But I use in our company, we use a lot of open source tools, and we're currently thinking of giving back to the ones that help us do our job more and more. And that's the mindset where open source is moving towards. Is like, okay, I want you to still have fun in your open source project because I depend on it, and I don't want to give you a lot of money just to spend it and making sure that my boss is not bothering me anymore with we should use something else. But at the same time, giving the sustainability to these smaller things or smaller projects that everybody's using is really, really cool.
Do you think that the corporate enterprise adoption and use of open source is reducing our ability in general to also help and empower individuals and communication among non-corporations? It used to be a real empowerment story and a real activism story sometimes, and a real science story. Are we losing that because corporations are on board nowadays?
I wouldn't say so. Maybe for some projects, but in the open source world I live in, because I am only part of a fraction here, I feel like the awareness is a positive thing. It's not just about, I'll send you over a present or a check or something, but some corporations might want to influence the way where everything's heading. But at the same time, there's some real humble thanks, to the maintainers of open source. And that's what I really like, and what I also see. So that's cool. This opens up, the freedom we get with open source is also that we are able to come up with new things. And I really like that this effort continues, like that there's new things coming up from open source. And that's like a no-brainer. It's in our generation nowadays, 2020, it's in our heads. Just a quick story is I read this book about Microsoft back then in 1995. They came up with their encyclopedia on CD-ROMs. And you were able to install it on, and it was this large company, Microsoft. They actually decided to shut it down, I don't know, a couple of years later. And nobody thought that Wikipedia would actually be much better, more comprehensive, and more people working on it. And that was like 20 years ago or 15 years ago, where open source clearly won. And nobody's actually holding on to Microsoft and saying, oh, you released something and it's not good. It's actually, that's how the mindset shifted and changed. And I really like that about open source. I mean, open source, open thinking, and and the web, where there's so much freedom in it.
Does that influence the sort of a business person you are?
Oh, yeah. Maybe I'm not the perfect business guy, and our company is not like out for profit. Our company's values are based that we want to have fun in what we're doing every day, going to the office and have fun with the people around us and with the customers we work with and with the software we work with. And so we also used another e-commerce software in PHP. I can't name it, of course, because I don't want to give a bad reputation, but that was like a couple of years ago. And my colleague said, after a couple of months working with just that system, can we finally go back to TYPO3? It's so much more fun. And that's like, oh no, we make more money with that other system. We should not use TYPO3 anymore.
Shut up and code.
E-commerce is where you get the money. We're not that kind of people in our company. So that's why, I don't know if it changes something, but it actually influences our decisions, because we know that open source has a good reputation in general, also for corporations and decision makers, and not for all of them, because we need to tell them still we're getting there. And that's why we're explicitly choosing that, because we see the future. If you take the Wikipedia example, it's a no-brainer.
Your company, I know a lot of the team, and we know each other fairly well. you are, in my view, a values-based organization. You as a leader care about your people, and I feel that your team, a lot of people in your company say that you feel like it feels like family, and I believe you. So I think you're a sort of a values-based company, and what you've just said fits with that. Having the choice and the flexibility of working with these tools means you also have the flexibility to revisit your decisions. I don't know, you're not bought in on a 10-year vendor license for some proprietary system, and you're just going to write gray suit code for 10 years just because that'll pay for a bigger boat or something.
Yeah, that's completely true. Even though right now our company called B13, there's no TYPO3 in it because and there's no coding in it. It's just a name. Not just a name, but it's a name, and it's not bound to whatever we're doing. If we don't have fun in using open source or maybe TYPO3 or CMSs anymore, we'll just build washing machines or sell washing machines because that's much more fun, and we can still use a B13.
Why washing machines?
Just something that might.
I'm tweeting B13
somebody.
pivoting to washing machines.
Yes, exactly. Anything, right?
Your clean clothes made in Stuttgart.
So we're not focused on locking ourselves into any system. But actually, 9 years ago, we were debating if TYPO3 still has a future, and some people do that regularly, and they should reevaluate their decisions. And I remember 9 years ago, it's like, what happens if TYPO3 is not going to sustain or like nobody needs a CMS anymore in 2 or 3 years? And we're like, well, we don't know yet. Still, people still use it, and we only know a fraction of people who use it. We still can stick to it and invest in that, and invest in our own future. So it's a kind of egoistic concept because we want to use TYPO3 for a longer time for a long time, and that's why we're also making it better.
And we talked about TYPO3 being quite a sustainable project with a long-term vision and individual sites and applications that work for a very long time. Does that lead your desire to keep working with TYPO3? I guess it not only pushes you to keep TYPO3 up to date and relevant, but does that change the way that you sell it or that you deal with your clients?
No, because for our clients, we look at what they actually need. Sometimes they don't need what they want. And
I am tweeting that, by the way.
Yes, that's totally fine. And we're helping them to find out what they need, and then they can make their own decision and stick with us, or even stick with another TYPO3 agency or WordPress or a non-open source system, which is totally fine because it might fit better to their ethics or whatever solution.
Sure, and if it's not, if your relationship doesn't sit right, it's nobody's going to have fun with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's of course another part. But if they just don't need TYPO3, then it would be overkill to tell them use TYPO3. That's the only thing you can do. I don't think that's the solution, because I don't know if everybody needs Kubernetes either, right? So you don't need to have Kubernetes for everyone. And they need to spend a lot of more money because of that.
I don't know if we're supposed to say that in 2020, but okay.
Yeah, I know. At the same time, 7 years ago, everybody was like, I don't need my own website anymore because I don't need a CMS anymore. I'll just put my website on Facebook. They did that, and that works. And some people don't even need a phone number anymore because they do everything through Facebook. And that's good, but then I would never sell them a TYPO3 system. They obviously don't have the need for such a sophisticated system.
So you try and find out what they actually need and what their goals are, right? And so it's your experience that people come to you and they ask for something specific, but it's like quite a long way down the thinking process, and you try and understand the beginning of that, or where they actually need to go to get the thing that they want rather than the thing that they've pictured in their minds?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a lot of thinking together and find the best solution, find a process where they exactly know if they need TYPO3, if they need a CMS, or something completely different. And sometimes they come to us because they need something completely different, and they end up with TYPO3, which is also nice. Do
you have an example of that?
one of our clients, they just run their website with TYPO3, and then some other department in the corporation came to us and said, well, we have our annual reports or quarterly reports, and we want to have them online. And here's our InDesign file. Could we bring that on the web? And we're like, well, you can feed the InDesign file. Of course, it's not built into TYPO3, but we can display it on as a separate website. And, that would be really fun to use and work with that. Also, the same process we had with print magazines where they switched from print first to online first. And that's one of the examples where it completely makes sense to help these corporations to switch, or companies switch to digitalization process and kickstart that. And not just for their website or their intranet. That's quite cool.
I guess both of those specific use cases, you guys must have a bunch of XML expertise at B13.
Yes. Yeah. We
one
do
of the
stuff like that.
One of my very early tasks at my first startup was publishing documentation, and the state of things there was we were publishing PDFs on a regular basis. And in the beginning, it was only the PDFs. Then it was the web pages available online and as PDFs. But we were writing the documentation online. And then I had the unbelievable pleasure of learning about XSLT transformations and ANT, and working with LaTeX at one point, which is LATE X. Yeah, boy. If I never touch that stuff again, it'll be too soon. So thank you for taking care of it, and I'll call you if I need it.
Yes, exactly.
Who is it that you think people should get to know? Who is it that I should call up and have a conversation like this with?
If you're on TYPO3 in general, there's one person you can't go around. You will stumble over that person. That's Jochen Weiland. Great person. You should talk to him. He has so many insights. He's a very kind person. And what I like about him are like his passion about TYPO3, and that he built his company on TYPO3 from day one and trusted the community, or right now myself, to trust in the TYPO3 community that TYPO3 will have a future. That's really, really amazing. And he's really been a great partner in so many topics. He's doing hosting with TYPO3.
I would love to talk with Jochen. And in terms of, I think maybe next time you and I talk, I want to talk about your ideas about contribution. Don't start now. He is an amazing open source, like a shining example to me of how contribution turns into value, turns into, jobs and companies and whatever. Because if I recall rightly, people were having trouble installing TYPO3. He figured it out pretty well and started putting out videos of how to do that. And it kind of snowballed into him having a hosting company and an agency business and all sorts of cool stuff. Yes, Jochen Weiland, absolutely.
One of my favorite persons to work with is Markus Klein from Austria. Mm-hmm. He's been in the TYPO3 core team a few years, and he has a lot of insights. He has a lot of special use cases. He knows so many features, and he likes to dig in the dirt and find out the reason why it was implemented in the first place, and give you a really, really good rundown on how it should behave. So that's really cool.
That sounds like a really interesting line of questioning. So he does like forensic coding or something?
I don't know how he does it, but he has a good understanding.
All right. Neat. Thanks so much for your time. I'm really enjoying this so far. And the next time we talk, I want to ask you in more detail about how you discovered it, the sort of things that you've built with TYPO3 over the years, what you're proud of, what you would have done differently. Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to it. So next time we talk, what hat are you going to wear? And I mean the one on your head.
I only have that one. So you'll get the chainsaw hat all day long.
I swear I've seen you wearing other hats. No?
Really?
Otherwise, TYPO3 Community Challenge, send Benny a trucker cap for Christmas. Go. The more hats he gets, the more different hats that we can see him wearing over time.
That sounds great.
Okay.
I love that.
Cool. Hey, so thanks again. I'm really enjoying this.
Cool. You're welcome. All right. See you next time.
Thanks to the TYPO3 Association for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you B13 and Stephanie Kreutzer for our logo. Merci beaucoup Patrick Gaumont, TYPO3 developer and musician extraordinaire, for our theme music. Thanks again to today's guest. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe in the podcast app of your choice and share Application, the TYPO3 community podcast, with your friends and colleagues. If you didn't like it, please share it with your enemies. Would you like to play along and suggest a guest for the podcast? Do you have questions or comments? Reach out to us on Twitter at TYPO3 Podcast. You can find show notes, links, and more information in our posts on typo3.org. Remember, open source software would not be what it is without you. Thank you all for your contributions.